Now that we have the axles on the car, it is time now to add the wheels. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to kind of orbit the car so I see it in what's known as isometric view. So something about like that. Doesn't have to be exactly like that, but that's the idea. Okay. And I'm going to go to the drop-down menu, select Import. I'm going to jump into Google Drive and select one of my wheels. So I have a design here, one here, one here. I think I'll use this one. Select Import as Component, and the wheel is going to be really big. Okay, so I'm holding the wheel here. I am going to, doesn't really matter where you drop it, you just need to drop it. Okay, now the wheel is 10 inches. That's the size that we drew the wheel. So the first thing I need to do is scale it down to the size that I want the wheel to be on my car. To do that, I'm going to get the scale tool. The scale tool is within the move tool, but it's down at the bottom. It's right here called scale. You can also simply press the S key on your keyboard for scale. And then I'm going to go to one corner. I'm going to click, start moving down, and I'm going to type in the size of the wheel that I want, preceded by a decimal point. So in other words, for example, if I want a 6-inch wheel, I'm going to type in 0.6 because that's 6/10 of the original size. So if my wheel was 10 inches and I size it down to 6/10 inches, it's going to be 6 of those 10 inches. So if I type in 0.6 and press return, that is now a 6-inch wheel. And that is why we made the wheels 10 inches when we drew them originally. Okay. So now I've scaled the wheel. The next step is going to be to add an axle hole and then add thickness to the wheel. All right. Now, if I were to draw an axle hole on the wheel right now, and it would be 3/30 seconds because that's the radius of my axle to give me a 3/16 inch diameter. So there's my 3/30 seconds. If I select that surface and delete it, you'll notice that it doesn't make a hole. And it didn't make a hole because if you remember from the axle video, when we were talking about groups, we said if something is grouped, new geometry does not combine with it. And what I mean by that is, see, if I take this wheel now and I move it, the circle's left behind because the new geometry, the circle, didn't combine with the wheel because the wheel is grouped. So the proper way to do this is before adding your circle, you must double click the wheel. That puts it in edit mode. Notice how the car faded off into this light green because you're no longer working on the car. You're only working in this group right here. Another way to do the very same thing is to 2-finger click on the wheel and select Edit Component. Either way does the same thing. I'm going to get my circle tool. I'm going to go to Origin. And again, when I draw this circle, I'm going to pay close attention to make sure that I stay on red axis as I move out. And I'm going to type in 3/30 seconds. However, this time, when I select that surface and press delete, it makes a hole. Next thing I'm going to do is get the push-pull tool. Now be careful not to click outside of the wheel before you do this, because if you do, the wheel is no longer in edit mode and the push-pull tool will not work. Okay, so you have to make sure you're still in edit mode and then get the push-pull tool, click on the wheel, pull it out 0.25 of an inch, because that is going to be the thickness of all of our wheels is 1/4 of an inch. Now you're going to get your selection tool and click outside of the wheel to take it out of edit mode. Now that I'm out of edit mode, I'm going to rotate a little bit. Now I want to put this axle right here, the axle hole, directly on the axle. To do that, you need to move the wheel from the edge of the axle hole. Do not randomly move the wheel from because you're never going to get that to line up. Okay? When you move the wheel, you need to grab it from the edge of the axle hole, and then your mouse will find the edge of the axle, and then if you zoom in closely, you will be able to line it directly up. Now, provided that when you drew those two circles, A, you drew them the same size, and B, you stayed on axis when you drew both the axle circle and the axle hole circle, as long as you did that, they will line up perfectly. I need another wheel, just like that on the other side. So I'm going to get my move tool. I'm going to select my wheel. I'm going to press Control key to turn copy on, and I'm going to slide it right on green axis, and I'm going to move it the length of my axle minus 0.25, which is the thickness of the wheel. So you have to subtract the thickness of the wheel from the length of the axle. So since my axle was 4 inches, minus 0.25 is 3.75 inches. And now my axles are right there. Now, if you move this over and you don't quite get it right, okay, you can always zoom in, grab the edge of it, and slide it out to the end of the axle. So you can place it manually if you get that math wrong. But the math just speeds up the process. Okay, knowledge is power. All right. So there's the rear wheels. The front wheels, same process. Whereas you're going to go back in, you're going to import a wheel. I'm going to select the same wheel I used that time, import it as a component. Get my scale tool. This time I'm going to make the front wheel 4 inches, so I'm going to type in 0.4 and press return. I'm going to get my selection tool. I'm going to double click the wheel. Draw my axle hole, making sure that I'm staying on red axis, so I'll do 30 seconds again, because that's my radius. I'm going to select the center and delete it. I'm going to get my push-pull tool, and I'm going to pull it out 0.25 of an inch. I'm going to click my selection tool and click outside to get it out of edit mode. I'll then grab it by the edge of the axle hole and slide it up to the axle, zoom in, and drop it right on there. I'm going to orbit around to the other side, get my move tool, turn copy on by pressing the Control key, and I'm going to slide it straight over on green axis, 3.75. Lands right on the end of the axle, and there's the car, now with wheels. I'm going to save the drawing, and now we're ready to move on to get ready to build the car.